Let's move on to some more stories now. Demands over proposed amendments to the minimum wage in the country persist. In Abuja, protesters gathered at Unity Fountain before storming the National Assembly. We have a report from Punarimam Feintola.
Workers demanding their wages are protected. The National Assembly has plans to remove the minimum wage, allowing state governments to negotiate directly with their staff. That's something that caused anger during nationwide protest on Wednesday. The demonstrators reached the National Assembly and kept going. They were met with some resistance by security, but it wasn't enough to stop them.
They must hear our voice. Sorry. We have one voice. They must hear our voice. We have one voice.
Protesters laid siege to the National Assembly, threatening to disrupt parliamentary proceedings if their demands are not met. Union leaders addressed the workers on their rights, saying the minimum wage is in line with international standards.
Comrades, we are here today on behalf of Nigerian workers, on behalf of Nigerian pensioners, on behalf of the downtrodden, to make it clear and unambiguous that the bill that seeks to remove the minimum wage from the exclusive list to the concurrent list is not accepted. Let me say that the issue of national minimum wage is a standard set by the International Labour Organization.
The workers are met by lawmakers who promise to give the bill their attention.
For what I'm seeing now, it appears to me and to the leadership that the organized labor are against that bill. And if you are against that bill, you are right, you have your reasons to be against it. We'll be on the ground in the green chamber of the House of Representatives to do justice to that bill. And I can understand the only justice to that bill is to kill the bill. Is that your position? Is that your position? Is that what you want? Remember in the 8th Assembly, I was the spokesman of the Senate. And I recall vividly, this issue of minimum wage was brought and we killed it. Your president is here. And because of that, I want to believe, has the conditions that led to the 8th Assembly decision changed? No. Nigerian workers, has the condition changed? No. I therefore want to say very clearly that in the past, we have stood toe-to-toe with the Nigerian workers. There is nothing that suggests we are changing from that direction. Rather, we will stand by you to ensure that the fundamental right of every worker is not only enforced, but is ensured and guaranteed.
Protests took place across Nigeria, with workers complaining of a rise in fuel and electricity prices, an increase in the cost of food, and a high rate of unemployment. Punarimam Feintola, Arise News.
Okay, Arise analyst, Associate Professor Sam Amadi joins us now for more on this. Very warm welcome, Dr. Sam Amadi, and nice to see you again on Newsnight Nigeria Sunday.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Would one want to temper or make an attempt to say this is season of anomy, you know, trying to temper Professor Soyinka's novel there? Because it's from one strike to the other, one, you know, protest against petroleum price increase, ASU threatening strike, electricity tariff and the rest, and now the National Assembly wants to shift the goalposts, saying that, look, let's remove this legislation from the exclusive list and allow the states, the federating states, to determine their wages.
Well, like you said, season of anomy, I mean, and it's coming, the topmost is the COVID. So link it up. Okay, fine. One of the things we're seeing all over the world is that states are becoming much more muscular in protecting earning, which is the first thing you do in what they call the Keynesian expansionary policy. You want to increase aggregate consumption. The US, we've seen what's going on there. For the first time, this is after FDR is the biggest intervention, not just to give people check, to increase minimum wage, also provide a lot of social protection. And this is a country with probably the poorest social protection ever. Even our neighbors, Cameroon, give more than we do. Women in some of these West African countries, when they are natal period, prenatal,
they have 6 months
support. So
and
basically, Nigeria's social protection is almost the worst. And then you are talking about removing a national minimum wage and giving it what I call raised to the bottom. That means the states can choose to fix it at basement level.
Even 3,000 naira per month.
Now, technically, the constitution can be amended. So the argument is argument of restructuring, argument of decentralization, argument that the states rightly has the ability to deal with labor issues. But if you look at the political economy of it, it's in the national interest to still federalize minimum wage, because setting that benchmark controls the tendency of state governors to go down below what is today. Think about states like Yobe. Think about states with very poor human development indicators, low consumption because of low earning. And then if you follow the so-called financial crunch, they could even, for example, say, if you say 10,000 or 15,000, a Chinese firm goes to Yobe, set up a plant, and hires people at the exact minimum wage, or even 1,000 above minimum wage. Legal. So the idea of a federal minimum wage is not just for people in the public sector, they forget that, is to create a benchmark nobody falls below. So if private entities enter that market, they will be able to say, we can't charge below that. And then you guarantee against, even the 30,000 is very poor, but essentially it's still reasonable. So the state should actually go up. For example, Lagos could be doing like 40. So not to stop a state from having its own minimum wage, but the idea of a national minimum wage, it can't go below that federal threshold. So you can go up if you are like Lagos, Port Harcourt, or Delta. But if you're like Yobe, then stick to the federal minimum wage.
I think Sam, we have close to about 16 states who have not implemented the 30,000 naira minimum wage. Sorry, Chinamere, I'm going to let you come in. Let me just quickly ask this. Doesn't this endanger the economy and the prosperity of the people? Is it going to create more poverty?
You mean removing it? Yes, it does. Yes. Because you see, the teaching we see from the Oxfam report, why Nigeria has so much poverty and inequality is because, one, low labor protection. We don't have laws that improve people's well-being.
Or we don't challenge the laws.
Exactly.
Because even labor can challenge this amendment that is going on.
But if they go through it, it becomes constitutional. The constitution says 2/3 of the National Assembly plus 2/3 of state legislators. And the governors can absolutely guarantee you tonight approval of 2/3
together with their state houses of assembly.
So if they do that, it's legal, it's constitutional. But the implication, the point we're making here is that it's a failure of patriotism to do that, because the implication of behavior, think about security. Part of the security challenge is poverty. Now, there's no entrepreneurship going on, enterprise going on. So you can't say you're unlocking enterprise. Most of the people are income earners. And so if you depress their wage, this is actually time to increase wage. And what countries are doing, like the US, is to public support for wage. So, for example, government can say, if instead of private sector reducing wage, part of the stimulus would be to protect wage. So you give them support to allow people not to go there, because once people reduce wage, the implication is that people consume less. And then it becomes a vicious circle, low purchasing power. It circles back to low production, because if there are nobody consuming, there will be, the production capacity will go down.
So, Doctor, in a way, all this is tied towards cutting cost. So what it means is the state governments, they're trying to cut cost. Absolutely. But if you cut cost in terms of reducing wages, really, is it that there are no other places they should focus on in trying to cut, reduce cost of government?
That's a big argument. So the point is, we know that the states are facing dire financial constraints. Even the federal government, the term of trade is very poor, because our receipt from oil, external receipt, going down, both even oil price, everything. And of course, the COVID crisis has created low productivity across the sector. Even tax, government is receiving less from corporate tax, but people are producing less. But the point is, start cutting down on waste. For example, they give an example of Yobe. The chairman, the DG of the Lagos Progressive Governance Forum said, why should Yobe pay like Lagos? Why should Yobe pay political office holder the same salary like Lagos? Now look at it. The federal government federalizes earning of public officers. A councillor, a chairman in Lagos, earns the same thing as a chairman in Yobe. the revenue and mobilization sets the standard. That shouldn't happen. Why should a state like, I'm using Yobe just for a case of it, whether it's Imo or whether, those states with low IGR and low, allocations, why should they have big houses in Abuja, like Lagos, Port Harcourt, Delta, and the states that can afford it? They should call them. This is where to call them. Why should they go on entourage? So if you look at many, I agree, they want to call them, but what they don't call them is earning. We've seen the failure of neoliberal economics, where under Reagan's influence and all that, now today Americans are revising it because it made the US, even as a rich country, one of the poorest in the world in terms of inequality, very high and low earning. So you don't dare deal with earning, because earning, apart from the justice of it, is economically wise, is strategically wise for national security and for the economy, that you improve earning, because without earning, they improve production, and they improve web, and improve even capacity for people to generate wealth. The Nigerian poverty level is so scandalous and increasing. If you look at the world poverty clock, we are making the biggest move away from into poverty. Ethiopia, who arguably is poorer than Nigeria, who might argue, is taking people out of poverty faster than Nigeria. So what that means is that even though we are a very poor country, we are actually increasing at a higher rate than other countries in the world.
Okay, Professor Sam Amadi, please don't go away. We're still coming back to you because we're going to look at the indices as it affects, the rumored hiking petroleum products prices. It's time for a quick break. We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us.
You're still watching the Newsnight live from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Chinemerem Joseph.
And I am Christian Ogden. Thanks for staying with us. Okay, we still have Professor Sam Amadi, is a professor of law at Bayes University and also a Rise News analyst. Prof, now, the argument and the demonstration, the hoopla, is still over the amendment of the minimum constitution for the minimum wage and the rest, and yet we're having problems about, government talk about deregulation of the downstream sector and the rest. If you deregulate, do you still remain the sole importer of petroleum products? If you deregulate, do you still fix prices? If you deregulate, what is the essence of PEF, the Petroleum Equalization Fund? If you deregulate, what are you still doing with the petroleum product pricing and regulatory agency?
I think you've raised several questions. But let's start this way. You see, the concept of deregulation is portmanteau word. It covers several things. So when people see government say they're deregulating, some people get the impression that government says they are not going to be involved in pricing. It might mean that government will follow market prices in determining price. So the deregulation of allowing the market price, so you don't have any PPRA, you don't have any equalization, the market price determine models like you see, like places like the US. Oftentimes when there's crisis, they weigh in and stop the pricing because of its domino impact on other aspects of life. But there's also the deregulation model where government set a benchmark, not above this and not below this. So the price fluctuates within that benchmark. Okay, so it depends on the landing cost, but other social costs, it can be 2 naira, it can be 210 naira, 205, 190, but probably it won't be less than 130 and it will be more than 250. So that's also a form of deregulation. Now, the regulation we are having is the one that PPRA seem to be still setting the price, but setting it closer to market costs because they want to avoid subsidy. But what we have seen now with the double speak, the PPRA says the price has gone up. Presidency, Minister of Petroleum said we didn't say so.
No, that is not aware.
We weren't aware. So,
the president is the Minister of Petroleum Resources,
not aware, but
and an agency under him is increasing.
But the problem is if you deregulate properly, as they're talking about, if you set up the way the original PIB is set up, it's not the president who will be aware or announce it. It's the regulator who should do that. But again, so there's a lot of model, and then you talk about petroleum equalization. Nigeria is still going to go with that because they want to make sure that some places where cost of transport is high, they will still have inequality or difference in pricing.
I think that inequality will be taken away once the rail lines are working
then
perfectly
the rail
well.
lines will not depress the cost to almost insignificant.
Absolutely.
But again, the question is, why can't we allow prices to even go up in different divergence? So if you're living in Yobe, for example, tomato is cheaper for you, presumably. it will be much more expensive somebody in the southeast where presumably we don't produce.
So you think there will be some sort of balance, equalization?
Yes, so the prices shouldn't be focused on the petroleum is higher here, because that's the real price. So we have to make up our mind whether we can sustain a market-based policy because of the economic impact on well-being.
But even with the PIB, we've heard the Minister of State say that PPPRA and even PEF will be scrapped.
Yes,
now,
with the PIB.
Yeah, so if we are going to deregulate, because I think it's partially happening now, some filling stations are selling at 175, some above that, some below that. I think the regulation has started really, but do we see Labour really agreeing with government to come to terms with this deregulation? Because government is saying they are waiting for Labour, but we don't see them coming to terms with this, and it's already happening, really.
But Labour will find it difficult to agree, because look, Labour's strategic vision or purpose is to protect the earning of workers. And don't forget, every price increase means that even the so-called minimum wage is less real income, less real takeaway. So Labour will be very reluctant to sign on to a policy that has huge impact on earning and well-being of workers. Then can government go with that level? I think the problem with the government policy with the regulation is that the government is not investing more on social protection. And they're not targeting well who need to be protected. The level of inequality is very high. People, 1% is capturing over 90% of resources. So there are billionaires in this town driving several cars who are paying the same. I'm a supporter of some kind of price discrimination. People who can afford have to be subsidized to consume. And one way to subsidize is to increase the earning of those who are below and depress the earning of those who are high, especially political office holders. So you can't just deregulate. It has a lot of economic sense, but then you have to do it in a way that you're also protecting the livelihood of those few people who cannot consume. So once you increase the price, for example, where are the trains, where are the buses? So there should be massive, if you have massive transport system, the shylocking will not happen. So even if you increase it, the tendency to overcharge commuters will not be there because there's so much supply of vehicle, even on lease. So what happened today is that we have shortage of road infrastructure, the amenities to go with it. And then when you're increasing this price of essentials, you are doing only one narrative, financial, we are going to gain 2 trillion. But then 2 trillion spent in the Nigerian usual way will not impact on. If you take away that increase, you take away, let's say, 30% of livelihoods for the poor. If you invest that 2 trillion, you don't give up to 5% to the poor because the rich captures through corruption, through misallocation. So primarily, these policies damage the prospect of economic well-being and increases poverty. This is a president that wants to remove 10 million people from poverty every year. I mean, it's a joke. If it's not a joke, then you cannot have these policies that chunk off the livelihood of the poor without a systematic and tested interventions that prove that they are adding more than taking away. That's just what it is.
Fantastic place to, drop the anchorage here. Associate Professor of Law and a Rise News Analyst, Dr. Sam Amadi. Thanks so very much.